All right, let's talk a little Brutus 1, also known as the anti-federalist papers. And don't forget, Brutus is the person in the story of Julius Caesar who killed the tyrant. And of course, Brutus is a euphemism, basically indicating that the author didn't think that the Constitution was a good idea because he thought it would lead to tyranny. So better to say Brutus, a little more subtle than, yeah, your idea is terrible. So, okay. So Brutus 1 is a lengthy, complicated argument, but we'll break it down and hopefully it won't be too difficult to understand. The one thing that, and I'm just going to go fairly quickly through this one because it is lengthy and I don't want to have these podcasts be longer than they need to be. So paragraph 6 is kind of where we start. The first question that presents itself on the subject is whether a confederated government be best for the United States or not. Don't forget the United States started as a confederacy. In other words, whether the 13 United States should be reduced to one great republic governed by one legislature under the direction of one executive and judicial, or whether they should continue 13 confederated republics under the direction and control of a supreme federal head for certain defined national purposes only. Now, the author of this essay doesn't mince words. He goes straight after what he perceives to be the absolute worst elements of the Constitution. And, of course, that's emphatically stated in paragraph 8. This government is to possess absolute and uncontrollable power, legislative, executive, and judicial. And it goes on to mention the necessary and proper clause. So that's the first target of the ire of this author is the necessary and proper clause, which you may recall is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 in the Constitution. So if you want to take a look, here is the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 is the powers of Congress. And, of course, Clause 18 is the clause that Brutus 1 is most alarmed by. Okay, so, and again, the fear when the country was initiated after the Revolutionary War was that the government that we would end up with would be no different than the one they just fought a war to get rid of. And so they were worried about centralized power. Brutus 1 also goes after the supremacy clause. And again, this Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. And again, in the Constitution, that's going to be in Article 7. You need to know your way around the Constitution. So Article 6, I should say. Here's Article 6. There's the supremacy clause. And this is all stuff you should absolutely know. You just have to know it. Okay, so those are the two big things that he starts to attack this Constitution over. And there's another one. The legislative powers competent to lay taxes, duties, and duties, imposts, and excises. There's no limitation to this power. So he, in addition to the implied powers clause and the supremacy clause, the author goes after the very first power of Congress listed in Article 1, Section 8, which is the power to tax. And again, if you look at the way it's worded, if you're skeptical of this new government, it is somewhat alarming. To lay and collect taxes, imposts, and excises to pay for the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. It's without limitation. So the author of Brutus is actually correct. And in fact, this has been a major source of policymaking. Not to make you all depressed, but the current economic situation that we're in. Where does the president get the power? Where does Congress get the power to just cut everyone a check? It comes from the power to tax and the power to borrow. Skipping ahead to paragraph 10 in Brutus 1. Brutus 1 also attacks the judicial power, saying these powers are very extensive. Jurisdiction comprehends almost all civil causes except such that arise between citizens of the same state. So it goes after the judicial power. All right, paragraph 13, the author starts to get into an answer to his proposed question. Should we have a republic or not? And in paragraph 14, this is another central component of Brutus 1, which is that, and again, just reading it, if respect is to be paid to the opinion of the greatest and wisest men who have ever thought or wrote on the science of government, we shall be constrained to conclude that a free republic cannot survive or cannot succeed over a country of such immense extent. So Brutus 1 expresses extreme skepticism over whether a large country would work as a republic. This is the exact opposite of what was being argued in Federalist 10. Madison saw a republic as the cure for faction in a large republic. Brutus 1 says a large republic cannot work. And furthermore, it is natural to a republic to have only a small territory. And he gets into a lot of the details of that. And again, large republic, men of large fortunes, less moderation, just a general skepticism that a republic is good for the people. And he goes on, history furnishes no example of a free republic anything like the extent of the United States. And then another criticism we see here in paragraph 17. In a free republic, although all laws are derived from the consent of the people do not declare their consent by themselves in person, but by representatives chosen by them who are supposed to know the minds of their constituents and to be possessed of integrity to declare this mind. So keep in mind, this was written before modern communication, and this is, I think, where one of the major elements of Brutus falls apart just because of the increase in technology that we have now. In those days, it was quite literally impossible to know what everyone was thinking about everything. There was no means of mass communication like we have today. So he's basically assailing the idea that you could have a representative government because it would be impossible for a representative to truly know what the people felt. And this is something, again, he gets into in paragraph 17 and 18 here. If the people are to give their assent to the laws by persons chosen appointed to them, the manner in which the choice and numbers chosen must be as such to possess, to be disposed, and consequently qualified to declare the sentiments of the people. For if they do not know or not disposed to speak the sentiments of the people do not govern, but the sovereignty is in a few. So he's setting up the argument that this is going to lead to corruption and stuff like that. And paragraph 19, country's too big, too many differences. Again, the opposite of what Madison was arguing. Paragraph 20 is, again, another opposite proposition compared to what Madison was arguing. In a republic, the manners, sentiments, and interests of the people should be similar. And again, Madison, and this is something that when you're explaining this would be a really good comparison to make. Madison believed that a republic is the cure for what he called the mischief of faction. In Brutus 1, he is rejecting this idea because there's just too many competing interests, and it would be impossible to know what everybody really felt about everything. So let's jump to the summary information on this. And again, this is in the review packets. This should be in the back of your Unit 1 packet. All right. So don't forget the symbolism of Brutus. That would be a good thing to mention if you get asked to discuss this in the argument essay. Brutus was the one who killed the tyrant. Don't forget. Okay, so here we go, point by point. Brutus was concerned about the concentration of power, very alarmed by this necessary and proper clause, and especially the supremacy clause. While Madison thought republicanism was the cure to faction, Brutus says that a republic won't work unless people have common beliefs, and you can't have that in a large republic. And then third, Brutus believed that things happening in the legislature would be unknown to the people, only local governments. We didn't really get into that in this screencast, but you can read it if you want. And then lastly, the author was especially concerned that there would be corruption and politicians seeking office out of self-interest, not the interest of the country. So comparing the two, this is a good little comparison section, by the way, if you haven't read it yet. In Federalist 10, Madison claims a republic over a large territory is best suited to protect the rights of the people, while Brutus claims it cannot last as the government of free people. So they had opposite beliefs about this idea of a republic. Madison thinks a large republic will attract men of high character through that competitive process. Brutus believes that you would attract people that were corrupt and only in it for themselves. So a very skeptical view of human nature. I think this one you got to kind of maybe tip the scale towards Brutus. I think there are a lot of politicians that get in there for the wrong reasons, but then again, there's some good ones there too, so who knows. Another element of Madison's argument is that local interests will be best met in the federal system. And again, we didn't really get into that, but local and state government, while Brutus claims the real intent is to consolidate power in the national government. So again, don't forget the anti-federalists were against the concentration of national power. And they were fearful that that's what you would get if you established the government as the Constitution set out. Okay, and then Brutus asserts that officials in state governments are closer to the people and more likely to protect their rights as opposed to a federal government where you'd have, all these states united by some national government. Brutus one just didn't think it would work.